Imagine a city that seems to be suffering from a very deliberate and honestly very successful split personality.
Yeah, a split personality is a good way to put it.
Right. Because if you look at it through one lens, you see a place founded on just pure grit, grime, this desperate industrial mission.
We're talking blast furnaces and coal dust.
Exactly. People huddled in wagon boxes during a high desert blizzard, literally trying to forge iron just to survive.
It's a harsh image. I mean, it sounds like the setting for a gritty Western where nobody makes it out alive.
It really does.
Yeah.
But then you switch lenses to the present day. You look at that exact same spot on the map, and you see a place known as Festival City, USA.
Right.
You have people flying in from London, from New York, just to see a Tony Award-winning production of Hamlet,
Drinking wine, hiking the Red Rock Canyons.
staying in boutique hotels. It feels incredibly cultured,
Yeah.
established, and, fancy.
It is a striking contrast, and we are talking about Cedar City, Utah, of course.
We are.
Usually when we look at towns in the American West, they tend to just pick a lane.
Right, like a mining town.
Yeah, or a cow town, or a college town. But Cedar City decided, well, why not try being all of them?
And that's exactly our mission for this deep dive. For those of you listening, we aren't just recounting a timeline today. We're looking at the actual mechanics of resilience.
How a community reinvents itself.
Yes, especially when its primary reason for existing making iron fails comfortably.
Spectacularly even.
We've got a massive stack of sources here: historical journals, geological surveys, economic reports, and we're going to trace this evolution from a prehistoric crossroads to a failed theocracy, all the way to this modern cultural beacon.
And before we get into the human drama, of which there is plenty, believe me, we really have to ground this physically.
Geographically.
Right, because with Cedar City, the geography isn't just a backdrop, it's the main character. It dictates the entire plot.
I was looking at the topography maps you send over, and unique is an understatement. The city sits at about 5,800 feet in elevation, but it's sitting right on a ledge.
Geologists and geographers actually call this a transition zone. It's literally the seam between two entirely different worlds.
Because if you stand in Cedar City and look east,
You're looking at the Markevent Plateau, massive, 10,000-foot alpine mountains, pine forests, aspen trees, heavy snow.
but if you turn your head 180 degrees and look west,
You are staring straight into the Great Basin. It's an arid, vast, sagebrush-covered desert stretching all the way across Nevada. It's a massive rain shadow.
so it's effectively a checkpoint. Whether you're migrating animals or humans, you have to engage with this transition.
Precisely. For over 1,000 years, this geography acted as both a barrier and a gateway. It forced adaptation.
You couldn't just have one set of survival skills.
Exactly. You had to master two environments simultaneously.
Well, let's talk about the people who mastered that adaptation first, because the sources make it very clear that this wasn't empty land waiting to be settled by Europeans.
Not at all.
This is the ancestral domain of the Nuuvi, the Southern Paiute people. And what struck me in the reading was that they didn't just survive this harsh landscape, they had completely hacked it.
That is a fantastic way to put it. There's this massive misconception that the high desert was just barren or hostile before modern irrigation.
Right.
But the Nuuvi and the Fremont culture before them, dating back to around 13 to 1300 AD, actually they saw it as a land of abundance, but only if you knew how to move.
They practice what anthropologists call vertical migration.
Vertical migration, yeah.
This was the real eye-opener for me. Instead of trying to force the land to produce food in one spot all year long, like a modern farmer would, they moved their entire society up and down the elevation ladder based on the season.
It's just brilliant logistics. In the spring, they were down in the valley bottoms, and they weren't just wandering hunter-gatherers either.
No, they had sophisticated horticulture.
Exactly. They built irrigation ditches technology that the later settlers would essentially copy, by the way, to grow corn, squash, melons, and sunflowers.
But then summer hits, and in the Great Basin, summer is just brutal. We're talking 100 degrees, dry heat, everything dries up.
So they didn't stay, they moved up.
To the mountains.
They ascended to those 10,000-foot plateaus to the east. Up there, it's 20 degrees cooler. There are mule deer to hunt, berries to gather, and agate to mine for tools.
They were effectively air conditioning their lives and diversifying their diet just by walking uphill.
Yeah, they really were. And the sources mention a specific concept that governed this entire worldview, Proxant tu vip.
Proxant tu vip.
It translates roughly to power land. This is crucial for understanding the difference in perspective between the Nuuvi and the later settlers.
How so?
Well, for the Nuuvi, the land wasn't a pantry you just took food from, and it certainly wasn't a commodity to be sold. It was a living entity linked to their origin stories and their spiritual duties. It was a relationship of stewardship.
And you see that ingenuity in their gear, too. I was reading about these pitch-sealed baskets.
Oh, those are incredible pieces of engineering. They wove baskets using willow and squaw bush. The weave was tight, but then they coated them with pinyon pine resin.
Basically, tree sap.
Right. Once that resin cured, the basket became a watertight canteen.
Which is huge in a desert.
Yeah.
Because if you can carry water, you can travel.
Exactly. And for the winters, they made these blankets out of rabbit skins. They'd cut the skins into long strips and weave them together, creating this incredibly warm, lightweight insulation. They had absolutely perfected the material culture for this specific transition zone.
But there's a darker disruptor mentioned in the history that happens before the permanent European settlers even arrive.
Yes.
We usually think of the cowboys and Indians narrative, starting when the pioneer wagons show up, but the dynamic had already been broken by the Spanish slave trade.
This is a really rough, often overlooked chapter. The Spanish weren't settling in Cedar City, but their economic reach was felt there. They introduced horses to the region.
Specifically to tribes like the Ute and the Navajo.
Right. And the Nuuvi didn't have horses at this point,
Because they lived in smaller, foot-mobile family units.
which fit their vertical migration lifestyle perfectly. But suddenly, this created a massive power imbalance. The Ute and Navajo, who were now mounted and more militarized, began raiding Nuuvi settlements,
They would capture people.
often children and women, and they'd trade them to the Spanish in New Mexico or California for goods.
So by the time the 1850s roll around, the Nuuvis are already in a deep survival mode. They've been forced into more remote areas, hidden away, just to avoid this predation.
Exactly. The social fabric was already under immense stress. And then in 1851, a new group arrives. And they don't want slaves, and they don't want furs. They want something very specific and very heavy.
They want iron.
They want iron.
Enter the Iron Mission. And this is where the story gets super cinematic for me. You have the Mormon pioneers in Salt Lake City, led by Brigham Young.
Yeah.
They are totally isolated.
Completely cut off.
If they want a nail, a horseshoe, or a rim for a wagon wheel, they have to import it from the East Coast all the way across the plains.
Which was prohibitively expensive. It cost an absolute fortune to haul heavy metal across 1,000 miles of dirt trails. Brigham Young knew that for his state of Deseret to be self-sufficient, they needed their own heavy industry. They needed to make their own iron.
So Parley P. Pratt goes down south on an expedition, sees literally a mountain of iron ore, and reports back. And Brigham Young doesn't put out a job posting, he issues mission calls.
Right. And this is unique to this region's history. These weren't prospectors looking to get rich. These were men, about 120 of them initially, who were called as a religious duty to go to the middle of nowhere and build a blast furnace.
And most of them were converts from the industrial centers of England, Scotland, and Wales.
Yeah.
Right? They were expert iron workers.
Yes. But the arrival is just, well, it's bleak.
It's November 11th, 1851. Henry Lunt leads the advance party of 35 men. They get to the banks of Coal Creek, and a blizzard hits.
Classic Iron Mission look. They freeze. They don't have time to build cabins, so they literally take the wheels off their wagons, set the wagon boxes on the ground in a circle, and huddle inside. They called it Fort Cedar.
Named after the abundant trees, which, and I absolutely love this detail from the sources, weren't actually cedars.
No, they were junipers. A botanical error that is now the permanent name of the city. But honestly, the botanical error was the least of their problems. The real tragedy of the Iron Mission is a chemistry problem.
This is where I want to dig in because the sources get pretty technical here, and I want to make sure we understand it. These were expert British iron workers. They knew how to smelt iron. Why did they fail so hard?
It comes down to the geology of Cedar City versus the geology of Great Britain. In Britain, they were used to smelting hematite. It's a specific type of iron ore that behaves in a very predictable way. In Cedar City, the mountain was full of magnetite.
So what's the practical difference for the guy actually working the furnace?
Magnetite is much harder to reduce chemically. It requires far higher temperatures and a completely different chemical balance in the furnace to separate the oxygen from the iron. But the bigger problem was actually the fuel. To get a furnace that hot, you need coke.
Okay, let's break down coke for the listeners. Obviously not the soda.
Right. Think of it like making charcoal. You take raw coal and bake it in an oven without oxygen. This burns off all the impurities, the sulfur, the water. the volatile gases. What's left is almost pure carbon, which burns incredibly hot and clean. That is coke. It's the standard fuel for smelting.
Okay, so they needed coke to melt this really difficult magnetite.
But the coal in Cedar City was terrible. It had massive amounts of sulfur and ash. It simply wouldn't coke properly. It kept clogging the furnaces, or it would produce this brittle iron that just shattered when you tried to use it.
So you have a triple threat of failure here. The ore was too hard, the fuel was too weak, and the weather was actively trying to kill them.
And the water. Don't forget the water. They built the foundry right next to Coal Creek for water power.
Which makes sense on paper until the spring runoff hits.
The environment there is volatile. Flash floods are common. In 1853, a massive flood tore through, wiping out their dams, their bridges, and months of hard work.
And amidst all this industrial struggle, the relationship with the Nuuvi completely deteriorates. The sources use the term water access denial.
This is the key conflict. In a desert environment, water is the only currency that matters. The settlers, totally focused on their farming and their ironworks, fenced off the springs and the creek access.
And for the Nuuvi, this wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an existential threat.
Exactly. They couldn't access their traditional horticulture sites. This displacement, combined with the introduction of European diseases, led to a total demographic collapse. Some estimates suggest 90% of the local population was lost.
90%. That is staggering. And for the settlers, the iron mission itself eventually collapses too.
It does. It sputtered along for a few years, producing a tiny amount of iron, enough for some nails and a church bell, maybe, but it was never commercially viable. By 1858, Brigham Young essentially said, pack it up. The railroad was getting closer elsewhere, making imported iron cheaper. The mission was a complete failure.
So picture this. It's the late 1800s. The blast furnaces are cold and abandoned. The town is isolated. It's mostly just sheep ranchers now. They have failed at their one big industrial goal. But in 1897, the community decides to pivot. And this pivot is fascinating because it isn't about resources. It's about their kids.
This is the moment that truly defines a modern Cedar City. The state of Utah authorized a branch normal school for the southern part of the state.
Normal school is such a weird term today. It basically means a teacher training college, right?
Correct. The norm was the standard for teaching. Cedar City lobbied hard to get this school because they knew it meant survival. They won the bid, but there was a catch. The state attorney general sent an inspector down to look at their temporary building.
And the inspector was not impressed.
He said, "This is garbage. It's not safe. You have to build a dedicated brick-and-mortar university building by September 1898, or we are pulling the funding and the school goes somewhere else."
They had less than a year, and they had absolutely no money.
No money, and it was the middle of an economic depression. So what do? They mortgaged their homes. The sources say that practically every single family in town put up their personal property as collateral to buy building materials.
But they couldn't just buy the lumber. They had to go get it themselves.
Yeah.
And this leads to the old Sorrel story. Now, I feel like every university has a founding myth, but this one is actually backed up by diaries and historical accounts.
It is. It's January 1898. They need massive timbers for the roof. The only place to get them is up on the mountain, the exact same mountain the Nuuvi used to migrate to. But it's winter. A group of men take wagons up there. They cut the wood, but then a massive blizzard hits.
The snow is shoulder deep. The wagons are completely bogged down. The men are sleeping in snow caves, dealing with hypothermia. They're literally arguing about whether to just leave the wood and save themselves.
And this is where the legend and the reality focuses on a horse. An old sorrel horse. Sorrel being that reddish-brown color. This horse was apparently just incredibly strong and exceptionally stubborn. When the men couldn't break a trail through the drifts, they put this horse at the front.
The description in the source is so visceral. The horse would rear up, plunge into the snowdrift with its chest, fall down, scramble back up, and just do it again. It was basically a living snowplow.
That horse and the sheer grit of those men got the lumber down the mountain. They finished the building Old Main just in time for the deadline. And I love how the historian in our source phrased it. This was the moment the town chose intellectual growth over material survival.
And that school eventually became Southern Utah University. So they secured the school. Now they just need people to visit. Fast forward to 1923.
The Union Pacific Railroad finally builds a spur line right into town. This changes the game completely. Cedar City rebrands itself as the gateway to the parks.
This is really the birth of the Grand Circle road trip.
Exactly. You would take a luxury train to Cedar City, stay at the El Escalante Hotel, which was this beautiful, fancy brick building, and then hop on a touring bus to go see Zion, Bryce Canyon, and the Grand Canyon.
And the architecture changed to match this new vibe, right? It wasn't just pioneer cabins anymore.
No, they brought in Gilbert Stanley Underwood. He's the famous architect who designed the lodges at Yosemite and Bryce. He gave Cedar City that national park rustic look. Big timber beams, sandstone, large porches. It made the town feel like a coherent, welcoming hospitality hub.
But mining wasn't completely dead, was it? It seems like this town can't quite quit the iron.
That is the irony here. Just as they establish this tourism identity, World War II happens. The demand for steel skyrockets. And suddenly, with better technology, open-pit mining becomes viable. Iron mining comes roaring back. In the mid-20th century, production went from practically 0 to 41 million tons. Cedar City became a union town again.
But mines close. Booms always end. By the 1960s, the mining is wobbling again. The town needs yet another pivot. And this is where Fred C. Adams comes in with an idea that sounds, frankly, ridiculous.
It really does. He was a drama professor at the college. He looked around at the tourists coming through to see the national parks and thought, what are they doing in the evenings? His idea. Shakespeare.
Shakespeare?
Yeah.
In the middle of the Red Rock Desert.
It sounds crazy, but his logic was destination theater. You hike Zion in the morning, you get dirty, you see the rocks. Then you come back, take a shower, have a nice dinner, and sit under the stars to watch Macbeth or A Midsummer Night's Dream.
And it started small, right?
Very small. A makeshift stage, a 2-week run in the summer, but it worked. The Utah Shakespeare Festival is now one of the biggest theater festivals in North America.
It even won a Tony Award in 2000 for Outstanding Regional Theater.
And look at the economics. It generates $35 million a year in economic impact. It transformed the identity of the town into Festival City, USA. It is the engine that kept the town alive when the mines closed for good in the 80s.
It's an amazing trajectory. From wagon boxes in a blizzard to Tony Awards. But we need to circle back to the beginning. While the town is putting on plays and mining iron, what was happening to the Nuuvi?
It was a devastating era. While the town was building its identity, the federal government was actively trying to erase the Nuuvi's identity. In 1954, Congress enacted a policy called termination.
Termination.
Yeah.
It sounds like a sci-fi villain plan, but it was real legislation.
It was bureaucratic violence. The goal was to assimilate Native Americans by ending their special status. They stripped the Utah Paiutes of federal recognition. They lost their land base. They lost access to health resources. It didn't lead to assimilation. It led to immediate skyrocketing poverty.
The stats in the reading here are grim. Nearly half the tribal population died during this period due to a lack of basic health resources.
It was an absolute low point, but completely consistent with the theme of this deep dive. They didn't vanish. They organized. They fought back in the courts and in Congress. And in 1980, the Restoration Act was signed, officially reinstating the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah as a sovereign nation.
And today?
Today, they are a major economic and political force in the region. The Cedar Band of Paiutes operates their own government, they own businesses from travel plazas to mortgage companies, and they manage land. The Paiute Restoration Gathering is a huge annual event. It's a powerful statement that despite the slave trade, the water denial, and the termination policy, they are still here on their Pwoxant Tvip.
That resilience seems to be in the drinking water down there. Speaking of modern Cedar City, the sources mention it's growing like crazy, up 22% in just 10 years. And it isn't just plays and parks anymore, it is rocket fuel.
This is the newest pivot. It's becoming a Silicon Slopes satellite. You have aerospace companies manufacturing solid rocket motors and aircraft parts. It's high-tech manufacturing. But there is a fascinating twist that brings us full circle right back to 1851.
Lay it on me.
There is a new iron mission.
You are kidding. After the failure, the floods, the bad chemistry?
It's back. A company called Utah Iron, LLC, has resumed mining. But, and this is the key, they aren't trying to smelt pig iron in a charcoal furnace. They are using modern technology to create clean iron concentrates.
What exactly is clean iron?
It's high-purity iron used for things like powder metallurgy and water purification. They are finally fulfilling Brigham Young's dream of digging wealth out of the ground, but they're doing it with global integration and modern chemistry that the original pioneers couldn't have even dreamed of.
That is wild. It really highlights the synthesis of this whole deep dive. If you look at the trajectory, Cedar City shifted from extractive value trying to pull iron and coal out of the ground to experiential value.
Right. Selling education at SUU, selling culture at the Shakespeare Festival.
And now they seem to be merging them together.
It's a multi-layered tapestry now. You have the deep-time heritage of the Nuuvi, the pioneer grit, the artistic flair, and the high-tech future all stacking on top of each other.
Which brings us to the big question. It's a success story, sure, but with that kind of growth, 22% in a decade, you have to wonder about the cost.
That is the exact question I'm left with. How does a community maintain its soul when it grows that fast? When you have tech workers moving in from the coast, buying condos right next to fifth-generation sheep ranchers in the indigenous community, can you really keep that old sorrel spirit alive?
Right. Can you balance being a tech hub with being a steward of ancient petroglyphs?
That's the challenge for the next century. But if any town has proven it knows how to pivot without breaking, I think it's this one.
I agree. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into Cedar City. Hopefully next time you see a Shakespeare play or a piece of iron, you'll think about the blizzard, the horse, and the incredible resilience behind it all. Catch you on the next one.